Echoes of the past. Carlos boarded the ferry from Havana to Miami in 1959, carrying only a suitcase and a faded photo of his long-lost uncle Raul. As the ferry pulled away, he looked back at Cuba, watching its shoreline disappear under the morning mist. The echoes of revolution filled Carlos' mind, but his heart clung to memories of family gatherings with lively Cuban music and his uncle's laughter. In Miami, Carlos found work at a local cafe where the scent of strong coffee and fresh Cuban pastries drew in other Cuban exiles. He quietly slipped a small notebook into his pocket, determined to record every lead about his uncle Raul's disappearance from years ago. The cafe owner, an older Cuban named Marta, mentioned rumors of missing relatives but warned Carlos to be cautious about asking questions. As he wiped tables and served customers, Carlos listened carefully to conversations, hoping for any mention of Raul's name. One evening, Isabel, a local journalist, stopped by the cafe, noticing Carlos' intensity and curiosity while listening to patrons' stories. Carlos approached Isabel, nervously introducing himself, and asked if she knew about any Cuban immigrants who vanished mysteriously. Isabel was intrigued by his determination and agreed to help him, suggesting they start at the Immigration Records Office. They spent hours poring over dusty files, uncovering stories of families torn apart by dreams of a better life across the sea. Carlos found Raul's name in an old record, dated 1955, with a cryptic note that simply read, "Unaccounted for." The note sent chills down Carlos' spine, deepening his resolve to find out what had happened to Raul in Miami's hidden underworld. Isabel suggested they visit Little Havana, where whispers of smuggling rings and secretive immigration agents floated through the air. Wandering Little Havana, Carlos heard echoes of his homeland in every street corner, where musicians played familiar Cuban rhythms. In the crowded streets, a man named Felipe overheard Carlos asking questions and offered to share what he knew, for a price. Carlos reluctantly agreed, handing over a few bills, and Felipe spoke of a dangerous network that helped immigrants cross undetected. Felipe revealed that Raul had once been caught up with people who promised safe passage but often betrayed their clients. As they parted, Felipe warned Carlos to watch out, saying some men from the old network still lurked in Miami's back alleys. That night, Carlos couldn't sleep, haunted by visions of his uncle falling into the clutches of ruthless smugglers. The next morning, Isabel handed Carlos a folder of newspaper clippings, each story hinting at lost Cubans who never reached freedom. In one article, Carlos noticed a familiar face. It was Raul, standing next to a man known for illegal immigrant smuggling. Isabel recognized the man as Ignacio Rivera, a former smuggler notorious for exploiting desperate people seeking refuge. Together, they tracked down Rivera's last known associates, finding one who now ran a rundown pawn shop on the outskirts of town. When Carlos entered the shop, the dim lighting and heavy scent of dust added to the tension thrumming in his veins. The shopkeeper, a wiry man named Ramon, denied knowing Rivera, but Carlos sensed he was hiding something. Isabel stepped in, flashing her press badge, which finally cracked Ramon's silence as he admitted he'd seen Raul years ago. Ramon hinted that Raul had paid a heavy price for his dreams, disappearing after a deal with Rivera went sour. Desperate for more answers, Carlos asked Ramon for names, contacts, or any details that could lead them closer to the truth. Ramon finally whispered the name of a notorious dock worker who had witnessed some of Rivera's worst deeds. The next day, Carlos and Isabel waited by the docks until they spotted the man, an older worker with a worn face named Pedro. Pedro was hesitant to speak, his eyes darting as if he feared invisible eyes, but Carlos promised they sought only justice. Pedro confessed he'd seen Raul arguing with Rivera over broken promises, watching as Raul was escorted away by armed men. The description chilled Carlos, who realized Raul had likely fallen victim to a brutal scheme exploiting vulnerable immigrants. Determined to continue, Carlos dug deeper into Miami's immigrant communities, hoping someone would remember his uncle. One night, an elderly woman approached Carlos at the cafe, recognizing Raul's face from the photograph he kept close. She said Raul had been kind, always sharing stories of his family, but one night he'd vanished, leaving behind only his hat. Carlos clenched his fists, realizing his uncle's memory lived on among strangers who still mourned his absence. Isabel suggested they confront the smuggling network directly, despite the risks, hoping to shine light on their dark deeds. Together, they traced Rivera's network to an old warehouse by the Miami River, where shady deals often took place. Carlos and Isabel staked out the warehouse, noting each shadowy figure slipping in and out, whispering in low voices. Felipe joined them, reluctantly agreeing to help, his eyes flickering with memories of past choices he could not erase. Felipe confirmed that Rivera's men still operated out of the warehouse, hiding both contraband and dark secrets. In a tense moment, Felipe revealed he'd once helped Raul escape Cuba, but they'd lost touch after a fallout with Rivera. Carlos felt a surge of betrayal, but he held back, realizing Felipe's cooperation was his only chance at uncovering the truth. They waited until midnight, then entered the warehouse, heartbeats quickening as shadows danced against concrete walls. In a dusty backroom, they found an old ledger containing names and dates, each page a record of lost or betrayed lives. Carlos found Raul's name among them, next to a note, "Disappeared, unpaid debt," marking the final blow of his uncle's journey. A wave of sorrow washed over Carlos as he realized Raul's fate, yet the truth also gave him a strange, bittersweet closure. Determined not to let others suffer the same fate, Carlos vowed to expose the smuggling network with Isabel's help. They left the warehouse, the ledger clutched tightly in Carlos' hand, a testament to his uncle's enduring memory. Over the following weeks, Isabel's articles sparked outrage, shedding light on the brutal practices within Miami's immigrant underworld. People came forward, sharing stories of missing loved ones, their pain echoing Carlos' own loss, fueling his sense of purpose. With renewed determination, Carlos set up a small organization dedicated to helping vulnerable immigrants navigate their new lives. The organization became a beacon of hope for Miami's Cuban community, a way for Carlos to honor Raul's dream. Carlos found healing in his work, knowing he was giving others the chance his uncle never had. Though Raul's fate weighed heavily on him, Carlos felt his spirit in every life he helped, a legacy born from sacrifice. Carlos and Isabel remained close allies, bonded by a mission rooted in truth, justice, and compassion for those who came after them. Standing on the Miami shore years later, Carlos gazed out at the sea, his heart full, knowing Raul's story would never be forgotten.